Good afternoon. My name is Kyle Whitmire. I am the state political columnist with the Alabama Media Group. I'm usually the guest in these sorts of things, but today I'm the host. And our guest today is Jim Parkman from the Parkman White law firm, defense attorney here in Birmingham. And the reason he and I are both here with you today is last week, Netflix released a documentary series called Trial by Media that looks at the effects of the public spotlight on our criminal justice system and on high-profile cases. One of those cases that they featured was one that I covered early in my career, and one that Jim took part in when he was, earlier in his career, and really put his name on the map here in Alabama. That's the Richard Scrushy case, the former HealthSouth CEO, who was accused of, remind me, Jim, it was 85 counts, 85 charges in that case?
I think it was 86 at one time. They dropped down to 36. They dismissed some. We ended up with 36 for the jury.
And then eventually you got to zero.
For a while, but we got to zero.
Well, Jim, tell me, well, first of all, let me just, walk through and remind people, because we were talking about this a little bit off camera, but this happened 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't look any different. You don't look any different, but a lot of the other people in this documentary look different than they did then.
Well, I told you I look like I've been rode hard and put to bed dead after I saw what I look like then and now. So I don't know what happened to me. You look the same, Kyle. You look identical.
I look the same from here up.
Okay. Well, you look great.
But this was a huge case. I mean, this was the fourth largest accounting fraud in the history of the United States. It might still be. HealthSouth was one of the few Fortune 500 companies that we had here in Alabama. It was, Richard Scrushy was this rock star CEO. And then about 2001, it came out, along with a lot of other accounting fraud scandals, including Enron and WorldCom, that a big portion of this company just did not exist. There were more than a dozen officials there at the company that either pled guilty or were convicted of participating in the fraud. But one of those who was not convicted, at least of this crime, was the CEO, Richard Scrushy, who was your client.
Yeah.
So just walk me through, what was your life like a year before this case came to you, and tell me, how did you get involved in it? How did you get pulled into being part of the Richard Scrushy defense team?
Okay. So about 7 months before I got on the case officially, 7 to 8 months, I got a call from Richard, and he wanted me to come to his beach house down at Ono Island and talk to him about joining a team of lawyers. I really didn't know much about Richard, being from Dothan. I didn't know much about HealthSouth at that time. They didn't have a facility there at that time. So I went down and talked to him. I enjoyed it, spent the day with him. It was enjoyable. He was charismatic as he can be at times, and just really a delight to be with. And he said, join the team. And I said, I'd be glad to. And the team consisted of lawyers out of Washington, D.C., and a few out of Birmingham. And he said, we're having a meeting on Monday. Can you come up? I said, yeah. I came up to Birmingham on Monday, sat down. We were all in a big conference room. I don't remember where, but we were sitting there, and they started about what they thought needed to be done. And this was right before right after the indictment came out, I think. And so they were going through this, and they got to a point of something that I didn't like. I didn't like it a bit. I thought, in fact, it was extremely risky. I thought it could end up in charges against some of the lawyers, the way they were doing it. And so at that point, I got up and told Richard, I appreciate it. I really don't want to be a part of this. And I walked out. Most people don't know that, and went back home, and didn't hear a word until September, before the trial, the end of September. And I got a call from Donald Watkins saying, hey, I understand, that you may be interested in doing the case. And I said, I knew about Donald, and I said, he said, would you come talk to me and Richard? And I said, sure, I'll be glad to come up there, but I've already, and he goes, I know the story. So I came up to Birmingham and met with them and had a long talk with Donald about trial strategy. And you saw a little bit of that on the show, I think. And what I felt like we ought to do to try to win the case. And then he asked me, he said, will you try the case? And I said, I've got some conditions. And he said, what are the conditions? And I said, condition number one is that I run the show. I don't want anybody telling me what to do or how to do it. I don't like that. We win or lose by what I want to do, the way I want to do it. And he said, done. I said, second condition is you've got to stay a part of this case. He didn't like that. He had other things going on. He had baseball teams that he were looking at buying, and he wanted to move on. And I said, nope, condition is you stay. I need somebody like you that I can talk to each evening and make sure we stay on the right track and do it right, and that we're getting home with the jury. So he agreed. That's why he stayed on the case. And so with that, I took over the case and late September and went to trial in January.
What was prep like for this case? I mean, this is an accounting fraud case, and I know that I got an education in the courtroom of how these things work. What was it like trying to get ready to take this case to trial?
Well, it really was kind of unusual in a sense. We had some Richard had hired some accountants, independent accountants. They took a quick, when I say quick, we're talking about maybe 3 or 4 week look at the books. Mm-hmm. Readily, they came up and said, "There's been a fraud. It's there. It's simple. It's not hard to understand." With that in mind, I said, "Okay, guys, they've dumped 7 million documents on us. Let's take a look at the documents, but let's look at it in a different light. Let's don't look at it and trying to prove there wasn't a fraud. There is one. The accountants say there is one. They're going to prove one. It's going to be boring to the jury. Let's go with the idea that the defense, that Richard did not know there was a fraud. And let's go with that. And let's find the documents that we need that would back up that and go from there." So what it boiled down to was looking at a lot of documents. I looked at every one of them myself, every 7 million of them. We passed them around a group that we had that were working on it. Art Leach did a tremendous job working on motions with the court that we found out a lot of information about during the motion hearings. We didn't win any of the motions, but didn't expect to. But we got a lot of information out of them of where they were going and what we needed to do. So we prepped on the basis that, hey, a fraud occurred, but our client didn't know about it, and that's the defense. So that's where we went with it.
You know, one thing this documentary focuses on is the importance and the power of being able to tell a story and tell a good story. Yeah. You know, you're a professional storyteller. I'm a professional storyteller, but you know, there's always, you know, complications when you're dealing with facts and not fiction. Things have to get, you know, left out. Were there things in this documentary that you saw that got left out that you thought should have been included in? And
you know, I don't know how. I think Netflix, Kyle, and I hope you would agree with me. They were extremely professional, and I don't think you can just put everything that happened during this trial into 60 minutes. It's just almost impossible. How they did it, I thought they did a great job. I thought you did a great job with the narration part of this and getting into the fact. I think that helped, but I think they covered it extremely well. And I think they put in a lot. There's a lot of stories that were, you know, they interviewed me for 2 solid days that went for like 10 or 11 hours a day. So no, they didn't put everything in there that went on during the trial, but they can't. It's impossible to do.
2 days. Wow.
Yeah, 2 days.
I think I just sat for an afternoon, but my wife and I just had our second kid about 2 weeks before this, and I was probably sleep deprived now in my mind. I'm glad they got a few minutes of material to work with. You know, one thing about this case that, and I don't think that this is a fault of them leaving it out, but it always just sort of shocks people when I tell it. I remember the day in January we're down in the media room. They'd set up they turned the jury assembly room into a room for media and with the live feed from the courtroom. During one of the breaks, Donald Watkins comes down and he says, "Y'all know this thing's going to go on till April, right?" It didn't go on till April. It went on till July.
Correct.
This was a 6-month trial, and there were, 6 weeks of jury deliberations at the end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it? How does that different than any other of the other cases you've tried? How does it affect, being in front of a jury for that long?
It's tiring and it's exhausting mentally and physically. What we tried to do is, I knew I was going to take the CFOs. I knew I was going to take some other critical witnesses on cross. But what we tried to do is break it up so that others would intervene on some days and give me a day off and let me kind of rest a minute. And second of all, if one person does it all every day, I think a jury could get tired of that person. Mm-hmm. So we tried to break it up so that it wouldn't be that it would be me. It would be, me, 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 and that's how we did it. And that gave me a break, gave the jury a break, and it left me with some of the witnesses that I really needed to deal with and be sure we were ready for. Because Bill Owens went on, cross-examination for him was 3 days. So,
well, you had 5. Every CFO to that point that HealthSouth had flipped and was pleaded guilty and was cooperating with the government. Including one. I mean, Bill, one thing that they didn't touch on in the story, which I thought was interesting, just to show what kind of case you were up against. They had Richard Scrushy on tape. Bill Owens had worn a wire, and gotten Scrushy to say some things on tape that didn't sound very good. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, it went on, the taping that he did went on for 2 days. Mm-hmm. What we were able to do is there was no direct admission that he knew anything about it. There was nothing. And Bill tried. They gave him directions on how to try to do that. They gave him a script on how to do that. So what we were able to do was, for example, the first day he went in, talked to Richard for several hours, and it was long. And we were able to show that after that, they didn't get anything that day at all. And Bill goes back to the house to turn in the microphone to where they were set up. And we were able to show at that point that they were disgusted about this, that he didn't get anything. And so they were trying to tell him how to go do it and put words in Richard's mouth and do it like that. So really and truly what we did is we started from the very, very beginning. And I think this was critical. They didn't get into this, but in opening, I made a point. I said, thank goodness for the tapes. Thank goodness they taped Richard Scrushy. Thank goodness you're going to hear what they did. And yet they got nothing. And thank goodness. So y'all sit back, listen to about 5 hours worth of this crap, and you're going to get nothing out of it because there's nothing to get. And thank goodness we have them. Otherwise, they could do whatever they wanted to do or say.
I'm thinking of another high-profile case, which I won't get into the details of it, that I covered, where likewise they had a informant who was wearing a wire.
Yeah.
Also ended in an acquittal. The jury's just not like informants who wear wires. They just seem too sneaky to trust, or what's going on there?
It's sneaky to trust because they're exactly like I said in the show. They're rats. They're after themselves. What can they get out of it? They're the first people, the rats eat their born. They jump off the ship first. They leave everybody else to die. They run around in the darkness, and hide.
Carrying big pieces of cheese on their heads.
Big pieces of cheese.
If you watch the documentary, you'll get the joke.
Yeah. So, no, I think they should be skeptical of people like that because they're not after justice. They're after themselves, just them. And so, and that played even a bigger role to me. It helped us out. We didn't know this for sure. This was just brought out in cross-examination. Wasn't in any discovery we got, but I had a feeling that, yeah, they talked to him and they said, you're not getting anywhere. And they brought that out. They said, yeah, that's true. And he admitted it. And yeah, they told me how to go back and try to get more stuff and told me how to do it. So here they are really manufacturing evidence, not getting evidence.
This, I mean, you got to an acquittal.
Yeah.
I hope I don't spoil it for everybody who watches the documentary, but Richard Scrushy was not acquitted in this trial.
No.
There was another one later.
Yeah.
But was this a fluke? Could you do this again? Had there been a mistrial, do you think it would have worked a second time? Because I mean, the judge in this case had to give at least 2 dynamite charges to get that jury to get to a verdict. Do you think it would have worked had the government had another shot?
Yes, I believe it would have. The way the evidence came out. Now, the reason we had some problems with the jury, you know, we had one that got sick, unfortunately, and they had to leave. Now, let me explain what that means. That means you get another juror, an alternate that comes in, and you've got to start from scratch. You can't pick up where you left off with the original jury. You've got to start from scratch and go back through all the thoughts, all the evidence. So that's a little bit of maybe why it took so long. I don't know that. I haven't talked to any of the jurors, but
had you been on the prosecution team in this case, what would you have done differently? What do you think they did wrong if you were playing the other side?
If I was playing the other side, first thing, I would have learned more about the people they were putting on the stand, and I would have brought out all the problems that those people had. I wouldn't have left it for a lawyer to get in there and destroy them after they've done that. Second, I would have gotten to the fraud real quick and gotten it over with. Going through numbers and data and how, and I know you have to, but I think you can do it quicker. I think you can do it faster because we told them right off the bat, there was a fraud. We admit it. Okay. So with that, I'd have gotten through it, and then I would have gotten into the other stuff, and I would have probably brought out all the bad that went on if I'd have known about it. Now, I don't know if they did. They may have kept all this quiet, may not have said anything about it.
Now, you, so about a year after this, after the acquittal, Richard Scrushy was indicted again, this time on charges that he bribed former Governor Don Siegelman when Siegelman was in office.
Yeah.
He was convicted in that case. And in here, you were in this documentary, you're pretty candid about why you didn't participate in that trial. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. Richard called and said, I want to talk to you. And I called Donald Watkins. I said, Watkins, hey, number one, I called Watkins to see if he would do it with me. And of course, Watkins was, no, I'm moving on. I'm in Miami. Have a nice day. And, but I said, what do you think? And he said, Jim, don't do it. And I said, why not? And he said, because you got nothing else to prove. Don't do it. It's a lesser case with not as much evidence. Let it go. Don't get back involved in it. And but Donald said, come up and talk to me. And of course, in the documentary, I went up and talked to him. And basically, I gave him a fee. I gave him probably a higher fee than I should, but I'd been gone from home now for months and months. I was ready to come back home. I had a young child, as you know, Kyle. I wanted to get back home, and being up here all the time was very difficult for me. And I appreciate my wife letting me do that. And so, I got into this and came up and talked to him, gave him a fee, and he just said no. He said, I know how you do it. I saw how you did it, and I can get another lawyer to do it cheaper. And I said, okay, listen, thank you. I wasn't upset about it one bit. I was kind of I guess kind of relieved in a way, because I did get to go back home and with the family.
Well, I covered that trial too.
Yeah.
There were lots of echoes of things that you did in the first trial that sort of bled over into the second one.
They used some of my stuff.
They used some of your material. It didn't work.
Nope.
But there was one analogy throughout the trial that you started with in the beginning. You already know what I'm talking about. And by the way, if you're going to watch this documentary, if you hadn't seen it, you don't want spoilers. I don't want to scare people away, but this might be the time for everybody to turn off. Because it is really the punchline of this entire episode. But go ahead and tell people what the analogy is.
You're talking about my grandmother and the pancake story.
I am talking about your grandmother and the pancake.
I started when I started practicing. It must have been about 2 years into my practice. I came upon this idea to use this analogy because it helped me with a jury. It helped me try to convey to a jury what an opening statement is about, and help me get into it and get to be able to talk about the facts and what it was about. So I started using this pancake about the other side of the pancake. My grandmother is the one that told me. So for 40, well, not then, but 30 years, I've been using this, and I've had a lot of people that love it. I mean, and I don't know why. I didn't think it was that great, but I used it out in California, and they told me that has to do with turning over some kind of a weird pancake they make in California for people, not a pancake, but you should have said that in California instead of a pancake. But I've been using this thing forever. And then we got down to the show, and I didn't know the questions. They didn't give me the questions before I got on there. And right at the end, they asked me, they said, did your grandmother really say that? They had told me in doing this, they said, tell us the truth. We want the truth about your thoughts and your feelings and stuff like that. On the show, I hesitated because I knew where this was going to go if they used it. And I knew oh my gosh, if they use this, I can't ever use this again. And I like it because it's not the truth. But I answered honestly, and I said, no, my grandmother never said that, really. And my grandmother was a great lady and all of that, but she could care less about pancakes and about flipping thing. And what she had one side. My grandmother had one side. She didn't care about the other side.
Well, Jim, you're a very creative person, and I'm sure you will find new material to use in the courtroom. That'll be just something.
Woo!
And I appreciate you spending time with us today. The name of the show is called Trial by Media. It's available through Netflix right now. The episode that Jim and I are both part of is about the Richard Scrushy trial. So you should go and check it out. Again, Jim, thank you very much for being here today, and thank everyone at home for watching.
Yeah, Kyle, thank you. So good to see you again. I hope everybody at AL.com and at your business, I hope everybody's okay. I hope everybody's safe. And, tell Madison, I really appreciate this too. It's been an honor to be with you. And I appreciate you letting me tag along on this show and be a part of it. I really do. I really thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you, Jim. You have a good day.
Thanks, buddy. See you later.